So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the Conservative Party's. A quarter of the Conservative Party's donations come from just 10 people, and the kind of impact it's had on the Conservative Party and how we can look at specific examples of this. So just 10 wealthy people account for a quarter of all donations made by individuals to the Conservative Party since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, according to new analysis by The Independent. So it's great work from them, and what we can gather from this is that these sorts of people who give big donations to parties, just like in America, get a lot of influence over the party. The top 10 super rich donors have given a combined sum of just over £10 million since Boris Johnson entered Downing Street. So that's what, about a year, just over a year, I think. 2019, no, 2 years. Sorry, 2 years. 2019 has been their summer. It's just madness that they're getting this amount. Campaign group said the Independent's analysis, based on the latest data from the Electoral Commission, showed the concentrated power of a small number of big donations. And we've heard stories about how the Conservatives have kind of secret meetings with people who donate over, I think it's about £250,000 or £25,000, where these people get meetings with the Prime Minister and with Rishi Sunak, the two most powerful people in the country. Darren Hughes, a chief executive of the Electoral Reform Society, said, I think they follow me on Twitter, I think they've been around for a while. These figures show just how concentrated donor power is in the UK, in UK politics. Debate shouldn't be about something brought by a few wealthy individuals. And we can kind of see examples of this with the government pushing people to go back into offices. Now, if you can work from home, you should absolutely have that option. But the government are pushing people to work from home. Go back to the office, because these, wealthy, like, kind of office owners, the ones that own office spaces, are losing tons of money because businesses don't need the office space anymore. Sure, some of them are going to convert this back into these offices into living accommodations, but that's going to it should in theory reduce the cost of rented accommodations and purchasing, because now there's more kind of supply on the market, and that's something that these guys do not want. Calling for strict new limits on the amount donors can give, Mr. Hughes added, it's time to fix the rot and restore faith in politics. We need to explore a cap on donations and greater funding to bring us into line with most advanced democracies. And this person, Mr. Hughes, is right. You cannot cede power to the rich and powerful of a country within a, quote, democracy. It ceases to be so. America is a massively flawed democracy, in part for this reason. That and their electoral system, which is absolutely baloney. Alex Runswick, Senior Advocacy Manager at the Transparency International UK Campaign Group, that's a mouthful, said these revelations underline the concerns that great wealth can secure a privileged audience in UK politics. Absolutely true. This article is a really good article. This dependence on smaller, wealthy donors risks shaping policy and decisions in favour of their interests rather than for the voters, which has happened. It's happened for a long time now. One of the 10 most generous donors is Jamie Rubin, co-owner of the Rubin Brothers property empire, who was given about £700,000. And they note how this person used their influence. Ultimately, they failed, but due to their connection with Boris Johnson, they almost got somewhere. His ties with the Tories came under scrutiny earlier this year when it emerged his company was co-investing with the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Group, PIF, in last year's failed bid to buy Newcastle. Leaked messages revealed that the Prime Minister had asked his advisor, Lord Edward Lister, to look into the chances of the deal being revived. Sir Edward said they were hopeful a deal could happen, and Boris Johnson said brilliant. So this person, the Rubin brothers, whichever one it was, had a direct line to Boris Johnson to get Boris Johnson to nudge the Saudi takeover of Newcastle United. Now, if any other kind of businesses, small, medium enterprises, were going to try and do an acquisition of another company, would you have a direct line to the government? No. And so by doing this, giving so much money, the Rubin brothers have a direct line to Boris Johnson. One other Tory donor in the top list, Mr. Cruddas, was handed a peerage, sparking accusations of cronyism from Labour. He bought himself a peerage where they can make a lot of money and they get a lot of influence. They get influence over the laws of this country to an extent. In June, the anti-corruption campaign, the Good Law Project, phenomenal work, as always, claimed that Mr. Johnson ignored the advice of the House of Lords Appointments Committee, making the businessman a lord. This man bought his peerage. The single biggest individual donor since Johnson came to power is Ren Kitchens. He has handed the party £2 million over the last 2 years, about £1 million a year. And these people are all buying influence at the table in order to get, their businesses better, conditions from the government, be it tax cuts, lower working conditions, or whatever. That's what these people are out for, and the government are giving them that. Boris Johnson has created a cash for access culture in the Conservative Party, in part because he needs it, because the guy's broke. We've mentioned this so many times. He's constantly complaining about his financial situation. He's run out of peas. He needs to break his silence and explain what he plans to do to ensure there isn't one rule for senior Conservatives and their cronies and another rule for everyone else. Do you remember a time when the government tried to say that if you're here, doing business or whatever, you wouldn't have to quarantine in hotels? Like, this is the nature of this government. And they'll sell out. They'll sell out for low amounts of money. That's the top and bottom of it. Politicians are cheap. They're a good investment always, because if they win, they'll pay off, and that's what we're seeing here. Last week, the Financial Times reported that an advisory board donor club featuring members who donate at least £250,000 was developed to connect Tory supporters with senior figures, claiming meetings have been held with Mr Johnson and Rishi Sunak. And the question you need to ask yourselves are, do you have access to these politicians in this way? No, because you haven't paid 250 grand. It's corrupt as hell, because these people have a direct line to our Prime Minister, similar to how Hillary Clinton booked out a theatre and sold, seats within that theatre to go and talk to her. She made a lot of money from doing that, because that's how it is. It's all about getting influence with politicians, so that when the time comes when they make that phone call, they're going to answer, and they're going to do what you need them to do, or at least try to, in the case of Boris Johnson. It's a very, very corrupt system that we're living in now. We're getting closer towards the American model, which is terrifying. Leading donor Mohammed Amarasi told the FT the group is like the very elite quintessentially clients membership. One needs to cough up £250,000 per annum or be a friend of Ben. Ben Elliott is the guy who organises this stuff. And the question is, why did Mohammed Amarasi tell us this? That's one of the queries I have. But, he's donated £189,000. Maybe he doesn't want to donate, an extra 80k or whatever it is to make it in there. Maybe he's just slightly annoyed at that. Most of the money was paid for a breakfast date with Mr. Johnson after he won an auction at a party dinner event. So you're talking about incredible sums of money being paid out to get influence, just to have breakfast or tea with a politician, and for them to do your bidding, essentially. Because if they did do your bidding, these people wouldn't pay out so much money. Amanda Milling, the Conservative Party co-chair, saying this doesn't influence the donations the party receives. So there's two ways you can look at this. Is the party already ideologically believes what these donors believe in, and therefore these donors are just doing it, so then the party kind of, so it's a guarantee that the Conservative Party kind of carries out the actions that both groups believe in, which will be very generous, but most likely the reason they're doing this is that Amanda Milling is wrong, and they're buying influence so that these politicians will do what the donors want them to do, which is what we're seeing right now. Why else would you be pushing people to go back into offices that they don't want to do? Go back to their 2-hour commute, which people don't want to do that anymore. They're happy to work from home. The reason is because these guys own offices, and the offices are empty, or emptier than they were before. She said all political parties raise money and accept donations in order to pay their staff, which is true, but they're not accepting £250,000 so you can speak to the leader of the party, which, ultimately is the Prime Minister right now. So don't try and spin this as like compare this to like the membership the Labour Party gets or the Lib Dems. That's a ridiculous argument. But what should we expect from a clown? Earlier this week, Grant Shapps said large donations to the Tory party should not be painted as some sort of immoral act. I mean, it is immoral. They're buying influence from the powers that be. Shapps also said the British public would not welcome any new limits on the amount donors could give, since he claimed it could mean more money coming from the public purse. I mean, that's not true. I mean, the Conservative Party spends more money on elections than any other party. It would just mean you can't spend as much. If you want it to come from the public purse, then you would pass a law to that effect. If not, it's not going to happen, is it, you dummy? In 2011, the Committee on Standards on Public Life recommended that political donations should be capped at 10 grand. They should be capped at 1 grand at the most. Because no ordinary person can afford to spend £1,000 or maybe even £100. Because no ordinary person can spend that kind of money to influence the Conservative Party. No one's got 10 G's like that. But the Conservative Party, the Tory Lib Dem coalition, said no, and we still have that system where they can donate a lot of money to these parties, and they can do it through back channels as well. One campaign group said that without limits on the size of political donations, political parties will continue to fail to build a broader, more democratic basis of financial support, said Runswick. one of the important things that these kind of influenced by is that we can see that with the cladding situation now with flats, you've got three different groups that could pay for the cladding, and it's the poorest out of the three that pays. You've got the construction company, or the developer, the owner, the freeholder, or the leaseholder. And we've seen leaseholders having to pay through the nose for the cladding to be removed and for the flats to be fixed, even though they weren't aware of these problems and they didn't actually have the cladding instructed in the first place. It was the freeholder who asked the developer to do this. And so surely it should have been the richer two out of the three. It should have been either the freeholder or the developer who paid for the cladding and for the flats to be fixed, but it was the leaseholder. Why? Because the government takes donations from these groups of people that own vast amounts of land, vast amount of flats, offices, all this stuff. And so when that call came in where it would have cost, these companies millions to fix the problems, they didn't have to pay out in the end. Why? Because the government protected them, because these are the groups of people that keep the government in power. They help fund the spin machine, and the spin machine in turn helps them save millions of pounds. Politicians are cheap. If you've got the money to buy one, or buy one or two, then why not? Because they are going to carry out your bidding. That's what we can see from this. It's an absolute joke. And you know what? I can't see Labour winning, so this absolute joke is going to carry on for a long time. But yeah, I don't know what more to say apart from it's corrupt. It's very we're heading towards the American system, and it's heartbreaking, to be honest. But yeah, that's where the country's heading ultimately, thanks to the people who keep voting Conservative. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.